Hello, this is Dr. Garret Castleberry, Associate Professor and Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I'm here with a special guest who is part of our guest interview series in COM 4603, Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements. We bring in a guest each week, working professional, and our students have the opportunity to interview them and perhaps even network in an asynchronous format. So their questions have been pre-produced and distributed to our guest speaker to maximize our potential to just have a warm, fluid conversation and allow him to speak to these questions and really inform us better about a different part of the world that still practices many of the things that we are interested in and potentially developing to work in at some point in time, at least for some of our students. Well, without further ado, let me welcome in our guest. Sammy Awami is with us. And Sammy has multiple degrees factoring toward mass media, mass communication, journalism, and has certainly lived up to those credentials working in various outlets, including, but not limited to, BBC Africa, right? Probably a tentpole recognition, but you also have a lot more covert work that you've been a part of. Sammy, welcome. And if you don't mind, take a minute or so, however long you want, really, and tell us a little bit more about your background and about what gets you to this place professionally that you're at currently.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate for having me in your class and share my experience, my background with your students. It's a huge pleasure for me to be with you. It's something that I've come to really enjoy when I get an opportunity to share my story, to share where I came from, and really try and inspire students or upcoming journalists. And it's something that every time I get an opportunity to do so, I'm really excited about it. So thank you very much for having me. Like you said, I'm a journalist, and last time when I spoke, this is the second time I've been appearing on your class. But last time we spoke, I was still working for the BBC World Service, and I was their correspondent here in Tanzania. I was a bilingual correspondent reporting for them in English and Swahili. Swahili is my mother tongue. But since last year in August, I stopped working for the BBC, and now I'm a freelancer, and I've been working with other international organizations, particularly Al Jazeera, and I've been writing stories for their website outlet. But also I have some kind of arrangement with Voice of America, which perhaps is familiar with their students, and the arrangement is to do stories for both radio and television. So that's what I do at the moment, freelancing. But I've also been doing a lot of training as well. Since I ventured into freelancing work, I've been getting a lot of really wonderful opportunities to train journalists. Some of them are very experienced, some of them have just started out. So training and mentoring has been something that I've been quite involved with recently. In March this year, I was in Zanzibar, which is an island here in Tanzania, training journalists with regards to COVID-19 and human rights and what media can do really in those circumstances, really bringing out the stories, especially violations of human rights during this COVID-19 period. And so we had a really wonderful training there. Really excited journalists and very enthusiastic to work hard to bring out this human rights stories, especially regarding coronavirus in the country. But also I'm in the middle of training another journalists who are based in northern Tanzania, the Maasai journalists. They have a local community radio station there. but they're also partnering with other journalists on the other side of the border in Kenya. And they're really keen to develop their community radio station to really try and make it more community oriented, so that they prioritize issues and stories which are happening within their communities. So I have been training them and mentoring them since last month, early April. But I'm also in the middle of another training that I'm doing, and that's about innovation in media. Now, this is composed of many journalists from across the country, and thank God for technology, meeting over Zoom, and so I'm able to navigate between one training to another. But it's been quite an interesting training, really, to really have an opportunity to chat with journalists and how they see innovation affecting their lives or their journalism, but also really enabling and enhancing their journalism. So I've been quite busy recently, like I said, doing freelance work here and there, but also training and mentoring journalists here in Tanzania. Very briefly, my background, I started off working for a religious radio station. It was a Christian radio station, and that was back in 2006. And I think that's when when I met you, Professor Castleberry. That was in Morogoro in Tanzania. So I started out as a producer and presenter, producing stories, Bible stories, and documenting them from books into voicing them and sharing them on the radio station as a way of sharing the gospel with people. So I started with that Christian radio. But then when I went to university, I joined a radio station. It's owned by university, but it's a community radio station, very much community oriented. And I was there as one of the news presenter and magazine program presenter, but also a producer. I did a lot of stuff there. So that's kind of like my first leg into mainstream media, really, because it's more of a community, although it was focused about community, but we covered a lot about, national issues and things like that. So I was there for about 3 years, and I moved to more of a national media. That was a newspaper here in Dar es Salaam. And then again, moved to another newspaper, where I also went on to become the foreign affairs editor for that newspaper here in Tanzania. And then briefly I worked for a scholarship, and that was in Toronto, Canada, where I was attending a journalism fellowship because of my work in human rights journalism. I did a lot of human rights stories when I was at this newspaper called The Citizen. And my focus was mainly on girls' rights, particularly child marriages and female genital mutilation, basically the female circumcision, which is quite prevalent here in Tanzania. So I focused on that, really sharing stories about, sensitizing, communities and the nation and international at large to fight these practices. Because even though they are very ingrained in cultures, they've been practiced for hundreds of years, but and more and more evidence are suggesting that these practices should stop, because girls are losing their lives and others becoming very, very sick. So I was really touched to continue shedding more light on those kind of stories. But generally, other human rights stories, albino killings here in Tanzania used to be quite prevalent. Thank God, recently we haven't had many cases, but the risk is still there. So those are the kind of stories which I really focused on when I was working for The Citizen, and that's why I got the scholarship to be in Toronto, at the University of Toronto in Canada. But then after that, that's when I switched to BBC, and now I'm a freelance journalist for Al Jazeera and Voice of America. I hope this is helpful, but I'm happy to take more questions with regards to my background.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. Fantastic introduction, and that context is so important for us. One of the wonderful things about your story here is it really does set up a progression for us to be able to work into these student questions. You're providing the foundation for us here. One of the students that got their questions in time but didn't get the video quite up in time, one of our students, Seth, I just want to lead with one of his questions. I may come back to a second one later, but it ties into right where your story left off. His question was, what is the story behind getting hired at BBC? But I want to help paraphrase that question a little bit for you and ask, what, if any, link was there to the time served at the University of Toronto and the BBC opportunity? Did one lead to the other directly? Was there a certain type of networking that took place? How are you able to transition from one to the other?
Right. To be honest with you, I believe it was some kind of miracle, really. I still wonder how did I get that job, because there were so many experienced journalists here in Tanzania who were very much qualified, but somehow I wasn't even in the country when they were doing the interview. I was in Toronto, Canada, but they were very accommodative. They were willing to do the interview via Skype, send my sample work via Skype and all of that. But I believe there was there's still part of, I don't know, some kind of preparations on my side as a journalist, I have to admit, because at that time, I think I had already worked as a journalist for about 10 years. So I did have experiences. However, most of my experiences were mostly print, in exception of those few years that I worked for community radio, which was a electronic media. Mm-hmm. So specifically, the Toronto connection, I believe because I had gotten that fellowship to be at the University of Toronto, I think it was sort of like a testimony about my work, that how much committed I was and how much accomplished I was as far as journalism and long form sort of kind of journalism. So because the fellowship itself was quite competitive. Every year they pick one journalist from sub-Saharan Africa to join 5 other Canadian journalists, to be based at the University of Toronto. And so I believe that was sort of a testimony or like proof of my commitment in journalism, but also accomplishment in terms of the kind of stories I was doing. Maybe not particularly human rights, because BBC covers almost everything. Mm-hmm. But I believe the scholarship reflected well on my CV to say, yes, this is kind of journalist who is accomplished enough even to receive this award and to spend time in Toronto. But other than that, there wasn't any connection. Like someone at the BBC maybe was like, I know this guy, and we can have it over. There was only a friend, a former college mate who was working at the BBC at that time, and she shared with me this link for the job, and she was like, I understand you've been working in print media, but the BBC is looking someone here in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to be a bilingual reporter. So give it a shot. You don't have as much experience in electronic media, but I know you're an accomplished journalist, so just try. And I was like, sure. I mean, I had plenty of time at that time. I thought, what do I have to lose? So I just went ahead and applied for that. And miraculously, they responded saying you passed to move to a second stage. So yes, there were many other journalists, but like I said, the fellowship was sort of like a proof of my accomplishment. But another skill, I believe, which really helped me was bilingual, bilingual skill, the ability to speak 2 languages fluently. I'm still learning. My English is not perfect yet, but I believe it was good enough for them to trust me to be their correspondent here in Tanzania. So yes, to students, I tell them every time I get an opportunity that if you have a chance to learn an extra language, language skills can be quite, handy when it comes to working as a journalist, not just as a reporter. Sometimes, big media organization reach out to me to help them with fixing or producing, putting things together. And because I'm a journalist, that I can speak a local language, but also I can speak their language, which is English, and that becomes quite a good asset. So if you get an opportunity to learn an extra language, go for it. As many languages as you can. So yes, I believe the language skills and the accomplishment that I had at that time really helped me.
Well, just as you are stressing the process and the benefits of learning, I have an education related question from Savannah. So let's kick off some of these student videos, and I should have it pulled up here. We'll watch quickly, hear from her in this instance.
Hi, my name is Savannah. This is my week 4's interview question for Mr. Samuel. So I wanted to ask, how has education played a role in your success in news media?
All right. So sometimes we get into conversations about whether or not education matters, or whether or not the degree is truly preparing us for the life ahead. Can you connect some of those dots and maybe relay some of the experiences that do benefit? I've got some suspicions based on what you already shared, but I want to hear it from in your own words first.
Yes, absolutely. Education helps. So yeah, stay at the university. It really helps. There are things, a lot of key things that I learned during my journalism school. A lot of media ethics, media theories and things like that, practices here and there. However, there are a lot of things I learned during my time as a journalist, practical. So I learned a lot of things as I went by in my career. But yes, there are a lot of things which I learned during journalism. But the challenge which I observed specifically with regards to media school is that the media industry is changing so fast, and the changes are massive. And so a lot of time, universities or institutions, journalism institutions, don't quite keep up with what's happening on the ground. So they end up, having curriculums which in one or another are sort of outdated. Mm-hmm. Just a couple of months ago, I was invited at one of the universities, one of the big universities here in Tanzania, journalism university, and they asked me to be part of the panel which was reviewing their curriculum and see what sort of things we could change. I was shocked to find that almost over 80% of content in their curriculum was still the same as the kind of stuff I learned about 13, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised, like, how can a big university like this one still not, grasp or still not aware of what's happening around the world? This innovation in media that's happening in the world that is so fast, and if the media is not keeping up with that, it's going to be in trouble. And so, journalism, I learned a lot at the university with regards to journalism, like I said before, different formats of news delivering, process of gathering stories and things like that. But I also learned a lot, as I was on the field. There are a lot of things which the BBC taught us, based on what, it wants to do things. There are things which I learned myself from experiences. You go to the field, you encounter something you didn't know about, you make a mistake for the first time, but later on, you learn and improve. However, because now I've got master's degree, and this is not in journalism, I did my master's degree in public policy. And I've learned a lot from that as well, which I apply today in journalism. Or even the fellowship that I did at the University of Toronto, it was not none of the subjects, none of the classes that I did at University of Toronto was to do with journalism. I did a lot of political science. I did, for instance, one class which was about the place of African women, or the place of women in African history. And I learned a lot about even my country and the continent at large when I was at Toronto, which was quite funny. And so even though these classes, even though these lessons and other university interactions were not necessarily to do with journalism, a lot of these things really enriched my understanding of issues when I go out and cover stories. So I was able to apply or understand issues and the stories that I'm covering in a larger context, rather than just seeing it as an exclusive or an independent or story or event. Mm-hmm. I was able to connect that with knowledge and that I got from my university classes, knowledge that I got from my history, from political science. And recently, just last year, I finished my master's degree from University College London in the UK. And I learned a lot about policy, public policies, processes of making policies, interrogating these policies, analysis and analyzing them and all of that. So there's a lot of non-journalistic knowledge that I learned from university, which I apply quite a lot on a daily basis when I encounter issues, because now I understand it in a larger context. I'm not sure if I've explained it well, but feel free to ask some follow-up questions, please.
Well, absolutely. And a takeaway that I'm drawing from what you're sharing here is, I want to put it even at the context of within the university system, with a given degree program, any given degree program, except some specific ones, students have a certain number of what we call elective hours. They have their electives. And the whole principle behind that is if they have an inclination, intuition, or just personal interest about where they might want to be professionally, they should be using those elective hours strategically, intentionally toward that goal. And that's the place where you should be able to align something like journalism with perhaps a secondary interest. It could be political science. It could be maybe, I say we've talked about human rights, and we'll talk about it some more, but over here you might take courses in what we call gender studies, which is a little bit polarizing here because it's kind of become politically charged. But the whole point of taking them is to help us better understand the context of where they come from, what they actually mean. And I think too often students, and students and departments are guilty of not helping each other get out of their own bubbles, or they also use words like silos. This is where the cultural term, the quote unquote ivory tower, end quote, right, comes from, is this idea that there's a lot of isolation at the university level. But electives should empower us in that way, or just as your story suggests, that is the whole purpose of an advanced degree, is to give us specialization once we are able to identify that area that we clearly see a path forming for our future involvement.
Absolutely, I agree with you. If you have an opportunity to take any elective courses that you're interested in, go for it. I'll give you an example of a friend of mine whose first degree is in medicine. He's a medical doctor by training, but he just loved journalism. But after he finished his university at a medical school, he joined a local newspaper, a national newspaper where I was working, and he's there as a health reporter. He did get some training in journalism, ethics, practices, and all of that. But because of his background in medicine, he's the best health reporter by far, in my opinion, in the country. And he's really helping to break down these complex medical stories, medical issues in the country in a very accessible way through the newspaper that he's working for. So yes, a lot of what we learn in the universities, whether journalistic or not journalistic subjects, they're really helpful when it comes to to analyzing and understanding issues that we cover on the ground as journalists.
Well, speaking of the channels that we navigate in journalism and otherwise, Stephanie has a question that I want to play. I think that's right up this conversation direction. Whoops, I'm sorry. Here we go.
Hello. So my week 4 question would be, have you ever been in a position where you felt your morals and your values would have been in jeopardy for the sake of a story? Thank you. Bye-bye.
I thought that was a very tricky and then very good question. I have been in that situation, and it wasn't easy to navigate. So I'm not sure if you all know, but I'm raised as a Christian, and I've been a missionary, I've had a church, all of that. But when I was working for the BBC, I've had to cover stories, for instance, which has to do with homosexuals and other issues, which from my belief, from my moral and then religious background, was quite conflicting, and that was very difficult for me. But not only that, I do have this, religious upbringing. And what I believe, to be true according to the Bible and all of that. But at the same time, I also call myself a human rights journalist. And so how do I balance all these things together? It was quite tricky, but somehow I found ways to cover that story. And so, yeah, every now and then you encounter those situations. But to be honest with you, I cannot tell you this is the best way to approach or to get out of those contexts. I would advise to really listen to your wisdom, listen to your heart, and find ways to do that, because I'm not sure I can come up with a perfect answer on how to navigate that. But I just so you know that I covered that story. And yes, irrespective of my conflict of, the moral and my professional background there.
Tyler, one of our students, has a question that has to do with the very recent global issue that you've introduced already. Allow me to play his video, and we'll lead to some discussion here about it. I'll just play up through his first question, I believe.
Hey, Sammy, my name is Tyler Michael, and I am currently a student at Mid-America Christian University. And I had the opportunity just to share some questions with you. And I'm really excited to really hear back from you, especially since obviously you live in a whole other part of the world, and really hear your feedback just on journalism, but also your feedback on social media and just everything under the sun that has to relate to this topic and relate to you personally. So I'm excited for it. And really, so the questions that I have for you are just 2 questions. And my first question is, how has the pandemic changed your job, and how have you continued to navigate those challenges? So obviously we know this last year and a couple months has brought a lot of challenges. And so how have you had to continue to navigate those? Obviously being a journalist, what different protocols have you faced, but also how has it affected you personally? And then also my second question.
All right. Talk to us a little bit more in detail about the experience for you on the continent of Africa during the global pandemic.
Maybe just a little background is that Tanzania, we handled the pandemic very differently from probably any other countries, at least the neighboring countries here. We had a president who was basically a denialist. He believed, he downplayed basically the effect of coronavirus, and so we didn't have any massive or major restrictions that many other countries around the world imposed as a precaution, against the pandemic. However, because I was still working, and I'm still working for international organizations, they take health measures very seriously. So they still advised for me to make sure that I adhere to those precautions. So a lot of time it was most of the time really I've been working from home. And so a lot of things, like you said, is a lot of things changed in terms of how I collected my stories, how I produced them, or if sharing that with my colleagues, who then go ahead and present them. What I can say is it hasn't been easy. The pandemic has come very as a surprise to most of us, and so the journalistic way, the procedures and processes of news gathering and processing and all of that, we're not set, or we're not meant, to work in this kind of situations that we had, and so a lot of things changed very dramatically, and we had to adopt, to new ways of doing things very quickly. But what this pandemic has come with, I would say, is it has inspired a lot of innovation in terms of the way we journalists do our things. And it's something that I've been sharing with this workshop, with the participants in this workshop that I'm facilitating at the moment, is that even in this crisis, media all over the world has found ways to be more innovative, to say, yes, we can't move out. We can't go out and meet people and interview face to face. But how can we continue doing our stories? So it has come with with an agency for journalists and the media at large to really be innovative and change the way we do things. And thankfully, we have technology. So things like WhatsApp have been amazingly helpful for journalists here in Tanzania. And it's because we couldn't travel and reach people on the ground and interview them face to face, we had to ask them, for instance, to record voice notes and send us back via WhatsApp. These are the things that we had been doing on a very social, interactions. We speak with our family instead of texting them. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm tired, or maybe I'm doing something else. I can't text. I just record the voice note and share with them. Now, because of pandemic and restrictions of traveling, the same ways that we use so much for social interactions, now we started using them for professional work. So we had to do a lot of, really instructing people. Some people had never used that before. So you had to instruct them, this is how you record a voice note, and this is how you hold your mic, and make sure you put it close, make sure you stay, against the direction of wind, and all of that. Really try to train our sources to record things that we can use for media. Because I also worked, for instance, for TV. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say it's a perfect transition to a question that I was sitting on from our student Seth. We don't have his video feed at the moment, but he wrote, with so many media and digital platforms now emerging, has this made your career even more busy and stressful? Or perhaps you tell where it can offer relief. It doesn't mean it's an either or category, of course.
Right. So I would say it's the mixed bag. We've had all of that at the same time. Advance of technology has made our work easier and simplified a lot of ways that we do journalism, but has also brought a lot of challenges. Today, not just journalists who are followed for news and analysis about what is happening around us. We've had individuals who somehow have rose from nowhere to become really popular on social media, and they're attracting a lot of audience. And in some cases, these individuals are more trusted than even established media. We've seen people using Instagram, we've seen people using Facebook and Twitter to really share stories instantly. And media have been, people have been, our audience have been wondering, why should we come to you, media organizations who are probably biased about something, whereas we have this guy who was giving us exactly what we want. So even though a lot of our work has been simplified in terms of news gathering, now we can find the news stories easily, because if something happens miles away, thousands of miles away, I can instantly find that on Twitter because someone has shared that. An eyewitness was there, and then they shared that instantly, before even I have to go to that town and physically find out, investigate what is happening. So it has come, with all of that. It has come with a lot of advantages, but also disadvantages and challenges for us as journalists. But certainly has been a great call for us as journalists to be more innovative in ways that we do things.
Excellent. There are some questions about journalism and about navigating the difficulties that we feature today from Megan and Britton. I'd love to work through each of their questions now. I feel like it's relating to this most recent response
For
you've
week
given.
4, the 2 questions that I have are: to what extent must you go in order to declare a source reliable and factual? And how hard is it for you to decide what news from one country will be of importance to another country?
All right. Classic journalism question. How do you vet your sources? And then how do you also, as editor, how do you determine what is worthy of maybe crossing those international borders?
Exactly. That is a very good question. And like I said earlier, it's part of the challenges that social media has brought with us, technology at large has brought with us, because everyone is sharing stuff. And sometimes there's people who are sharing that. They don't even care that this story, would have impact, because they just want, their news feed maybe to go viral. They want to be popular. So they just feed, and sometimes even intentionally trying to mislead people. So for instance, during election time, for instance, here in Tanzania, we've had that problem. For instance, in the island of Zanzibar, sometimes there's violence. So in the past election, there used to be violence. And so even in this maybe new election, even though there aren't any violence, or maybe violence did not happen to that scale, people would still share stuff like old stuff which has happened before. And so you're left to become confused, like is this something that happened now, or something that's happened in the past. So it's quite a challenge, and there are many ways really to verify this information. First of all, you have to ask, or you have to check who has posted this video, this information. And quickly you would go, like, for instance, if it's on Twitter, how many followers do they have? When do they join, Twitter? Do they even have a real name, or sometimes just some random name with, a million numbers, next to their names? How legit, does their profile look? So if you found that, if you've done that, and make sure that, their profile, looks legit, then you can go to check to more than one source. So has someone else also seen this thing? Has someone else also shared this thing? But in this case, you would also go to you have to find maybe a local journalist, because we trust that journalists, will do their job and really do it properly, because they know the ethics and boundaries, and do's and don'ts of jobs. So usually I would find a journalist and ask them, are you aware of the story? Have you heard of it? Is there any way to verify? Are there any authorities are verifying these things? But ultimately, you would also go to authorities. If it's about violence, then you speak to police and really make sure, have you seen this thing? Is it true? Or is it something that you're following? And, between trying all these different ways, somehow you can verify that this story is true or not. But it is true that it's a lot of challenge, and sometimes I get it wrong. And in that case, unfortunate case, then you just have to apologize. But I hope this is helpful. Check who has shared the story, how legit they are. Maybe even check their past posts. Who are they? Why are they sharing this? Has someone else seen this, especially from that area? But also there are technologists these days in the newsroom. They can place these things, and they can check, even verify where the thing was taken, what time and when. So that makes it easier. But I hope these few steps can be helpful verify whether the story or the source is legit or not.
You've talked a
How
little.
do I decide a story?
I'm sorry. You've talked about verification, but we have a different students that submitted their written questions. We didn't quite get the video yet, and they asked about really building up a network of contacts. And the question from Neri was, how do you build up a rich network of contacts in critical areas like regional governments, institutions, civic society, and maybe even the philanthropy community?
So there are so many ways to do that. Sometimes I build these contacts when I'm doing a particular story. So if I'm doing a story about water and I don't have a contact from the Ministry of Water, then I have to ask, for instance, from my colleagues, do you have a contact from this office? Or I have, these days, again, technology, I go to their maybe social media and ask, I'd like to speak to this officer. Could you please share with me their phone number so that I could reach out to them? And once I get that contact, I save it because I know next time I might need it. But other times when I go to an event, there could be more than officers who are attending that event. And I make it intentional to try and develop as many contacts as possible. And sometimes, even events which are not related to news. But if I see there's an opportunity for me to go there and make contacts, I try to do that because our work as journalists relies on contacts. And sometimes when I travel, I become intentional, or I make it intentional to meet local journalists from that area, because these journalists work more closely to the officials or other good contacts from that area, more than even myself, who is coming from a different town. So I meet with them on a very casual settings. We'll go out for a drink or hang out. I'll ask them about what's happening in their area, what stories are they working on, and really develop that relationship. So next time when I'm not in that town and there is a story that has happened, either this journalist becomes my good source, or they can share with me contacts of officials or other important people who like to speak with them. So networking is something that you definitely have to be very intentional in cultivating, because your work relies on that. And as a journalist, usually, in many cases, it can be easy for you to develop stories. Although in some cases, when you say you're a journalist, everyone wants to stay away. Oh, I don't want to say anything that will end up on a national newspaper or anything like that. But if it's in a casual situation, you can explain to them, like maybe even themselves, sometimes they would like to speak to you. So it's good for both of you to exchange contacts. So there are different ways really you can develop contacts.
What I hope this appreciate from hearing your experiences is that we're getting a look into what is considered the healthy side of journalism, right, and the journalistic ethics that it takes to produce stories and to work through these processes. Unfortunately, stateside in the U.S., we're in a period of culture where journalism now has a little bit of a stigma attached to it. And it's not because journalism itself is a bad practice, but a danger. And we talk about this a lot in a different class that we work through in the major. But a danger is that a lot of our journalism evolved into what one media theorist calls infotainment. And so a lot of our news is kind of like spirited debate that intentionally never gets resolved. It's more entertainment, but the ramifications of that infotainment is that it, like social media it drives people apart instead of maybe bringing them together. too much of that, and because TV cable news is more visual to us, it's more seductive than just reading, which people read less and less, in at least in in the Western Hemisphere. Anything that's visual can replace it. But hang on. But what is an issue is basically that the entertainment side and the business side of creating confusion right now is very popular here compared to maybe the dry, old-fashioned investigative journalism.
I agree with you. We have a challenge as well here in Tanzania and a lot of other parts of Africa. It may not be exactly like how you've described it, but I do follow different sources to try to understand challenges that journalism is facing right now, and all over the world, traditional media is facing a issue. Our audience do not trust us. They have so many other ways they can get news, and they get the kind of stuff that they like. And so traditional media has a lot to do, really to bring back that trust. And as far as I've read, I don't think there's already a fix to that or any solution which has proven to be working. But it is a crisis that the media is facing all over the world. Our audience do not trust us. But I'm reading, from what I'm reading, is that community media are becoming even more and more popular among local people. I'm reading that local people these days trust more community media over this national or international media, because they feel like there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of questionable material in this traditional media. But when they read from their community media, they see things that they even themselves know about. They see things which are happening around their area. So they believe that this community media, is doing the right thing. But generally, the media is in that crisis, and unfortunately, we're still figuring out what can we do really to try and fix that.
Oh, we have just a couple of more questions, and I'd love to sneak Marcia in here. It's a little bit soft at the beginning, but I think the volume picks up as the question starts.
Hello, Mr. Awami. My name is Marcia Hicks, and my question is, are there ever assignments that you do not feel quite as ease or comfortable with doing? And if so, how do you handle your nerves or feelings toward those interviews? Thank you.
It happens. It happens all the time. I remember one time, for instance, where I was assigned to go to State House. The president was speaking to journalists, and I was supposed to go and cover that story and potentially ask it a question. It was probably the biggest story that I had ever done before, or in terms of the profile of my source, and I was extremely nervous. I'm not even sure what I did to do that, but I think because I had practiced quite a lot before getting at State House. I had two questions, and I said, these are the only questions that I'm going to ask him if I get an opportunity. So I practiced and practiced. But I mean, there are so many ways people suggest. I like I said, I'm not even sure what I did. Even when I was asking a question, I was still nervous. You could hear from my voice I was nervous. So there are situations where you really can't help it. You're human. You get nervous. You feel, and it happens. Even when I'm being interviewed, for instance, for live segments with my colleagues, and maybe especially if it's it's in English, it's my second language, it's on word service, it's going to be broadcast all over the world. I get nervous about that. But you try different things. And I think in most of these cases is that, the techniques that you use for other, situations that maybe do not relate to journalism, to calm down your nervousness could also be applied in one way or another. So for instance, in this case, when I was interviewing the president, I imagined him as not as a president, but as a politician that I met when he was a minister. And back then he was not intimidating. So I was telling my mind, forget that this is the president. He has all the power and all of that. Just think about this man that you had met in the past years as a minister. Or just forget, like you are interviewing him and there are hundreds of other journalists listening, and maybe it's being aired live and all of that. Just think about a one-on-one encounter with a man that you had met before, and his and he is willing or he's ready to listen to your question. So that was one of the ways that I used. But also, me being interviewed maybe with for a live or even a recorded interview, I try to imagine I'm speaking not to millions of people who are listening to me at that moment, but I'm thinking that I'm just speaking with a friend or a colleague, and that helps me to calm my nervousness. So these have helped me in many ways, but in other circumstances, just using other techniques that you could use to calm down your nervousness. I hope that helps.
Oh, excellent.
But I still get nervous even today. So I do not have a perfect solution for that. I'm afraid.
And more people than we realize would be in that, situation. Well, Britton, we're winding down our questions here. Britton is on deck, and then we will conclude with Aaron. Let's hear from Britton first.
Hi, this is Britton Thaggard with his week 4 questions for Samuel Awami. My first question is there something no one knows about the work that you do that you wish more people understood?
Real quick, is there anything clear up misperceptions about your field?
I'm not sure. I've never thought about that, to be honest with you. I'm sorry, is he talking about specifically about misconception? Or just things that I'm doing, but they're not known to many people.
Yeah, perhaps.
Or some of the work that I'm doing that are not known.
Some of the behind the scenes steps that you might take. Maybe we take for granted the labor that goes into, let's say, freelancing. That's what you're doing in your most recent instance. You could share maybe about some of the experience with Al Jazeera or Voice of America.
A lot of people, especially young journalists, would think for a journalist like me, who have been in the field for almost 15 years and I've worked with many media organizations, that I get everything right. Like every time when I pitch a story, it's a perfect story, and the editor says, "Oh, absolutely, that's fine." Or that during my process of producing stories, maybe I write a perfect script. Maybe when I narrate, I just make one take and it's perfect. No, there's a lot of learning that I'm still doing even today. There are so many times when I pitch a story to an editor and he tells me that's not a story. I remember one of the Megan, I think, she asked about how do I know this story would resonate with other countries or with other audience in other countries. When I pitch, for instance, for an international organization, some of the stories that I think, oh, this is such an important story, the world has got to know about this. I pitch it to an editor and he says, or she says, oh, that's a very local story. It cannot fit for our outlet. And so maybe the simplest I can put this is that I'm still learning and I make a lot of mistakes, and it's fine. My scripts, either in Swahili or English, I share that with other people. Some of them are maybe not as experienced as I am, or maybe they're just good in certain areas. I share with them, could you have a second eye on this one? and let me know of any improvements that I can make. These are the things that I don't think many people know. When you see my byline on Al Jazeera, you feel like, oh, he's done this amazing job right from the beginning. But there are a lot of struggles which go behind the scene. But it's a learning process, and it's fine. And I'm not sure you can ever get to a point when you are absolutely happy with whatever you produced first time.
At times, the students may, and I don't tend to view our students as complaining necessarily ever, but they may express fatigue with some of the repetition in many of our writing assignments. Although our goal intentionally is to put upon them a variety of writing types as they work through curriculum in the major, but it's not a random, accidental, unintentional decision. We're trying to help build up their own writerly confidence, as well as basic coherency and grammatical clarity. We're working on a number of things, and they only get that through experience. That repeat experience is so valuable. Well, let me share Britton's second question here, and then we'll pivot to Aaron.
And my second question is, at large publications such as BBC, how strong is the emphasis right now on ensuring the public feels they can trust the news they're receiving? Thank you so much. Looking forward to your...
Right. I think we sort of covered this a little bit when we were talking about trust issues that the audience, between the audience and the media organization. But maybe just to emphasize on just to add another point from the previous question is that, for instance, you talked about writing and how that can be a work in progress. And I admit to you that writing is still a bit of a struggle for me. I would like to improve that. It's not easy to write a good story. It's not easy to write, an amazing story. And thankfully, my wife, for instance, is a better writer than I am. So often I ask her, and she helps me pretty. So, you shouldn't be ashamed about, or you shouldn't feel burdened or exhausted. It's something that you can learn, and you should be enthusiastic or keen about improving your writing skills, or even any other skills. Really, whether it's language or interviewing or anything else, you should be prepared to learn. Throughout your career, because that's how you improve your work. But with regard to your second question, is that they haven't perfected, a way. I don't think there's any media which has perfected, that part. They say that we've done so well that now our audience trusts us completely. What media organizations, including the BBC and others that I'm working with, emphasize on is that objectivity, truthfulness when you're doing a story, balancing, all of these very basic, journalism principles that I'm sure you've learned in your journalism classes. They are still quite very, they're still very important even today. Our audience, should be able to trust what we are sharing with them, should be able to trust that when they hear news from our media organization, they know our agenda is only to inform them, is only to educate them about what is happening about this issue, not to mislead them or trying to convince them to make a decision. Now, it's different, I understand, with many other organizations, because other organizations, they clearly identify themselves with taking sides, either supporting one side or another. But for global organization like the BBC, which position itself as not having an agenda, and they want to accommodate and include views from all over, from all groups within society. What they insist is for journalists to be objective. What they insist is for journalists to approach any news without any kind of agenda or any kind of malice or anything like that, but treat the story just as a story and include both voices or all voices that needs to be included in that story. So that's just one of the ways. But again, if you're working for a media organization which is frank about where they stand and what they support, I'm sure they'll have a different way of making sure that they gain trust from their audiences. But for global organization, they just insist on objectivity and balancing of your story.
You use a great key term there. Global organizations, and particularly global news organizations, that there's a reason many of them have higher credentials, they're higher sort of like reputations internationally, because that some of them have more of just a pedigree of objectivity, which is honestly increasingly difficult, because there's an irony. We live in what's called the information age, but we're also living in the digital age. And when so many digital messages are vying for attention by however means necessary, the authentic information messages can be obscured or silenced to a degree.
Absolutely. And I think that's why even for organizations like the BBC, they say even your social media accounts, they are not your personal social media accounts. Whatever that you post there, you should know that it will reflect on your position as a journalist. And so if you reflect any controversial material, if you post any controversial material there, you're undermining your credibility. You are undermining your chances for people to trust you as a neutral journalist who can bring stories in a more balanced and more objective ways. But I understand it can be different. For instance, for United States, for audiences who follow Fox or those who follow MSNBC or CNN, that it can mean a whole lot different things when you talk about objectivity. But for organizations like the BBC, they're very keen about that, and they do training, a lot of training, insisting about how you conduct yourself either on social media or even outside social media to make sure that your credibility is not questionable.
Let's wrap up with a trio of questions from Aaron. There's a little bit of follow through. The first one, Matt just set up some context for us, but I appreciate her efforts this week and definitely the responses that we're getting thus far.
Hi, my name is Erin Watson, and I am super excited for this interview. Your credentials are completely impressive. My first question for you is, could you briefly describe your work with SON International and give us a little bit more information on that organization?
All right, SON, what are we referring to here?
Right, so this is it's actually called SON International. Yes. It's a Christian charity organization, and it has branches. It has a branch in the United States, but also here in Tanzania as well. Their work is to distribute clean water to people here in Tanzania who do not have access to clean water. Clean water is a massive problem here in Tanzania. There are so many people, unfortunately, I do not have exact figures here, but it's a huge problem. There are so many people, even in big cities like Dar es Salaam, who do not have access to clean water. So what SON International Organization does is they distribute these filters, the biosand filters, to villagers or people who do not have access to clean water, and sort of, because they're very simple, it's a very simple technology, but also it's durable, but also it's something that can easily be used by even people who are not, highly educated or do not have any any access or to any technology or electricity or anything like that. So they make the filters, and then they distribute that to villages across Tanzania. But that's not their only mission. Like I said, it's a Christian organization, and so they use this as well to sort of spread the gospel as well. Using water and make that reference to Jesus as a living water. So they use that to share the gospel as well, but also just generally share about our WASH program. Issues to do with sanitation and other health issues in schools, but also in other communities across Tanzania. So the organization was founded by two missionaries who happen to be my friends. I've met them, just before I finished my university, and they were based here in Dar es Salaam, and they became friends. They were really good friends of ours. We used to go to church together, and once I became friends with them, and I heard about what they're doing, I was involved with them. Initially, I could even go to visit their workshop over the weekend and actually making filters, because I appreciate the work they're doing, not just to share the gospel, but also to distribute clean water to a lot of people in Tanzania who are not privileged, to have clean water. But over the years, now they gave me an opportunity to be one of their board members. So now I serve as one of the board members, and really help them with the work here in Tanzania. Suggest about their, give some advices about strategic ways of doing their work, but also sort of help them with, sources of funds and things like just general, roles that a board member would do. So yeah, it's a Christian organization, and I work there purely as a volunteer, as one of their board members.
Well, wonderful. Aaron is also interested in some of the more challenging work that you've been a part of as an investigative journalist, and so let's continue her line of questioning here.
My second question is, I watched a news clip on your LinkedIn profile regarding a story that you did on an albino attack in Tanzania. And my question is, regarding such a heartbreaking topic, what kind of impact did that story have on you as a reporter? And are attacks such as that one still something that occur in Tanzania to this day?
It's a very good question, and to be honest with you, those kind of stories have huge impact, to me as a journalist. It's just one of those stories where I personally make an exception. When you talk about objectivity and all of that, you're like, this is clearly a huge violation of human rights. There's certainly a clear line to make here, when it comes to reporting these stories. It's extremely saddening. I've sat down with kids. One of them, I remember, was 7 years old, and I speak with him. His name is Barak, and he was telling me about that night when the attackers came to their homes and they chopped off his hands, and how painful that was. It was really difficult for me to even listen to all those details, and just imagining how that might have been for her. I've met another girl who was also chopped her hands, right from all the way up here, and she was telling me how they later found out that it was her dad who organized with his attackers to come and chop her hands, because they promised him they would give him a lot of money. And so he, very, sad, very, 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 I don't even know how to describe this, gave up her daughter to be that, gruesomely cut by strangers just because of money. And this is all based on, witchcraft beliefs that albinos' body parts, can be used as charms for people, or if mixed with other potions, they can be used for people to get wealth, especially in mining areas, where miners are looking for quick ways of making money to get gold and other gems. So they affected me personally so much, or even stories about girls when they, they narrate to you how they're being circumcised as young as 11 or 12, and then right after that, they're being married off, to men older, like, 3 times older than them, to someone they don't even have a clue. So these stories have huge impact, on me personally as a journalist. And that's why when I could back then, I made it a mission for me to really focus on this kind of stories, to really, make sure that the world understand or know about what is happening, to these, poor communities, and find ways, to intervene or do something about it. So yeah, they definitely have a huge impact on me emotionally, but even, journalistically. And this is why I think she had asked another question about how do I sensitize my journalist friends with regards to human rights stories. What I tell them briefly is that, yes, we do cover stories that relate to human rights stories on our day-to-day basis, but there is a need for us as journalists to be intentionally, looking for these stories and say, these stories deserve to have much more platform than waiting until we encounter with them accidentally, because a lot of time stories of human rights violations involve people, minorities, people who are not able to defend themselves. You're talking about kids 7 years old, being chopped off by older men just because they want money. You're talking about girls as young as 10 or 11 being circumcised just because of some old beliefs, or their parents wants to marry them off. These are victims who are not capable of defending themselves. So as journalists, because we have opportunity to share these stories with the nation, with the global audience, it is our responsibility to make sure that we shed light on these stories consistently, so that our audience know about this, and if something that needs to be done, can be done.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to that and speaking to these issues, as well as your experiences, as well as what is an incredible and productive life that you're able to share with us. It was wonderful to hear about what you're doing with so many mentoring programs. I'm hearing you're teaching, right? You may not get the compensation for it, but you're teaching, you're training, you're mentoring, and so much. Unfortunately, of journalism, isn't there a lot of the kind of invisible labor, thankless labor that goes into that? But it's important work and impressive work. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, connecting with us, regardless of an 8-hour time difference. We were finally able to coordinate
No
that.
problem. My pleasure.
But it's really meaningful. Blessed by your visiting us here virtually, and grateful that we can connect virtually, and just a fantastic opportunity to have you share with our students. Any given class, a majority of them will have maybe have never left this hemisphere, or may not leave this country, a healthy number. And it's so important to be able to understand the context, a global context, for not only how connected we are, but how much this communication between us matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for having me, Professor Castleberry, and your class at large. I'm like I said, I'm thrilled to have these kind of opportunities to really share my experience with people who would love to join this profession. When I left full-time journalism, I thought I would try and venture into something else, maybe policy-related kind of stuff, based on my degree in Masters in Public Policy. But after being outside full-time journalism, I found myself really missing that, and now I'm even thinking about how can I go back to there. So it's always a huge pleasure for me, a huge privilege for me to get this opportunity to speak with students and really encourage them about journalism. And it's definitely something that, it's worth, dedicating your life for. So anytime, whenever you feel like you would like to hear from me, I'm available. Let's plan for that. And thankfully now the world is opening up, and maybe I may come to United States. Who knows? I would love to visit you guys. I have a family and friends in Texas, and Oklahoma and other places. So maybe sometime I could, I would love to come over there and we can have like a face-to-face conversation. I think that would be great.
Absolutely. And knowing that when and if, and we're all hoping and wishing, if not praying, for things to open up in a big way. We would love to coordinate and bring you on campus here. It'd be fantastic, and we would treasure being able to host you in person. Sam, thank you so much.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And for our students, we really look forward to, of course, your feedback in the form of the interviewee synthesis paper that you all will complete at course's end, where you're taking ideas and aspects from each of our guest speakers and you're creating a comparison and contrast. You're looking at similarities and differences between these various professions that we're looking at, and ultimately, though, you're finding that connective tissue. And oh, by the way, you all are part of that connective tissue. It's our desire for that. It's our professional development objective, our learning outcomes in the communication, media, and ethics degree program at MacU. And so thanks again to our guest speaker, and look forward to continued future engagements in COM 4603, Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements.